Hello, hello. I'm your co host for today, Dr. Carrie Jones, and I am so excited to bring on the Louisa Nicola. She's a neurophysiologist and top human performance coach. I mean, top. She works with athletes, Olympians, CEOs, you name it. And I brought her on to pick her brain, literally and figuratively, so you can understand how she approaches her clientele to get their brain better. We talked about the latest in brain research, brain aging, and the easy, simple things that we can do to improve the performance of our brain, down to the thoughts we have, the motivation we have, the actions we take. Because if our brain isn't healthy, not only can we not make hormones or we can't have energy, but we may be making decisions we regret or didn't want to make in the first place, but our brain was going a different direction because it wasn't feeling that healthy. So if you've been noticing, you could probably use some tips from a brain coach, a neuroathletic coach, then listen up. This is the podcast for you. Louisa, welcome to the Root Cause Medicine podcast. It's so nice to see you, and I'm glad to have you here.
Oh my gosh, I'm so excited. Carrie, you were on my podcast, 3 years ago now?
Yeah, before I had a podcast, so I'm happy to have you here. And today we're going to talk about brain health. I've heard you on several other podcasts, and obviously your Instagram famous, dropping your one-line clinical bombs around brain health. And I think that's really important because when we think of brain health, we think of dementia and Alzheimer's. And a lot of women I talk to in particular go, that worries me, but that's later. Like I'm dealing with the now. I'm in my 30s. What do I need to know now? Or more importantly, I'm in my 40s. What do I need to know now? And that's what I want to cover today. And literally, pun intended, pick your brain about.
I love that. And it's so funny that you say women, especially because when we look at Alzheimer's disease, which we're going to go into, I just want to set the ground. 2 out of 3 cases are women. And Alzheimer's disease right now affects 8 million people in the US, 55 million people worldwide. That number will triple by the year 2050. So if we've got 2/3 of that population being women, then we've got a problem. And we'll go through all of that. But it's funny because I did a podcast yesterday and I had the same question. People saying, but people in their 30s and 40s don't really care about that because Alzheimer's disease or dementia is that time locked or that time stamped disease, if you will, that you're diagnosed with at age 65 or 70. It's like, well, yes, but if you just break down the word neurodegeneration, degeneration happens over a long period of time. It doesn't just happen at, oh, you're 65, happy birthday, you're 65, here you go. Here's Alzheimer's disease. It's an accumulation over a long period of time, which actually starts in your 30s.
And I think everyone maybe can feel that and they chalk it up to stress or they chalk it up to kids or they chalk it up to perimenopause. And so they're not as worried about it or is tight in their lifestyle habits, let's say, that they should be. Because again, they're like, well, what do you expect? I have 2 kids under the age of 4. Like, of course I'm stressed and can't remember things. Or of course I'm 47 years old and going through perimenopause. Of course I can't remember things. And it's yes, and as I've heard you say multiple times, you can be so proactive about it.
And the thing is, it's really important that we differentiate between stress related memory loss, if you will. Like, for example, me, I'm like, sometimes I forget people's names and I think, okay, well, I don't have dementia, I don't have Alzheimer's disease. And it could be very much correlated with maybe sleep deprivation or your lack of exercise or whatever you'll have. Okay. But let's just set the ground right now in terms of talking about dementia, because dementia is the umbrella term. I think people just get a bit confused with that. It's the umbrella term that is really used to describe a set of symptoms of cognitive decline. Cognitive decline, such as memory loss, decline in information processing speed, decline in our thinking abilities, concentration. Now, there's different forms of dementia which sit underneath that. We've got Alzheimer's disease, which is the most prevalent out of all of them. You've got Parkinson's dementia, which comes about due to Parkinson's disease. We've got dementia with Lewy bodies. We've got frontotemporal dementia, which is what Bruce Willis has. The dementia with Lewy bodies, I believe Robin Williams had that, which is a devastating disease as well. So you've got all of these disease states that sit under the umbrella of that. Now, there are around 30 genes involved in dementia. And I'll be really clear with this because 3 of the genes that are responsible. Like if you get these genes, then there is going to be definitely a diagnosis in your life of dementia. That is presenilin 1, presenilin 2, and amyloid precursor protein. The other genes, I mentioned there's around 30 genes. The other 27 are just lifestyle or risk genes. So when we talk about Alzheimer's disease specifically, we actually want to talk about the genetic factor and then just the lifestyle factor because, Carrie, it turns out that around 95%, 95 to 97% of the cases of Alzheimer's disease currently are driven through lifestyle, which I think is just monumental. And I think this is where the shift needs to happen in public health and health policy, right? Because it's like, oh, I don't have the genes for Alzheimer's disease, but I've got Alzheimer's disease. How did that even happen? I think that that is wild. And one of the differentiating factors between Alzheimer's disease and dementia is the fact that AD, which I'm just going to abbreviate AD, is marked by two things. One is the accumulation of a protein called amyloid beta. Now, you've got amyloid beta already. So do I. It actually, in some cases, is a protective protein in our brains. But over time, which we're going to go into, they tend to clump together and they don't get cleared out. We have an impairment in that clearing process, and that impairs the transmission of neuronal activity. Your neurons can't fire together. And then there's also something else that happens. So the tau happens outside of the neuron. There's something else that happens within the neuron. And for everybody listening, the neuron is our brain cells. We have many types of brain cells, but the neuron is the chief brain cell. It's the only electrically active brain cell in our brain. And we've got around 87 billion of them. And the neuron has a cell body and it has like this leg that comes off it. It's called an axon. And within that axon, that's where we get the breakdown of these microtubules. And they end up having this breakdown and accumulation of tau, another protein. So these two biomarkers within the brain is what actually differentiates Alzheimer's disease with dementia.
And I think it's important for people listening. She mentioned 3 main genes that are a mouthful. But before everybody freaks out and thinks, I need to go get those tested, she also said 95 to 90% of this is not due to genetics. So while yes, you could go get them tested, there's so much we're going to talk about on how do you fall into the 95% to prevent as much as possible.
Yeah. And I will tell you that it's the same as if you've got chromosomal disorders. If you've got a genetic mutation on chromosome 4, you'll get Huntington's disease. And then we've also got Down syndrome, for example. It's the same thing. It's if you do have these 3 genes, you will 100% know it because your genes, you get one from mum, one from dad. So maybe mum ended up with what we call early onset dementia, something that is marked in your maybe late 40s or early 50s. So that's one that we will definitely know. But the lifestyle genes is something that everyone has heard of. It's called the apolipoprotein E genes. So ApoE4. A lot of people know about this because of Chris Hemsworth. He had a documentary that came out and he actually possesses 2 of these genes. So again, we get one from mum, one from dad. Now he's got 2 ApoE4 genes. We have ApoE2, ApoE3, and ApoE4. We need these again. So these are proteins. They are lipoproteins and they actually help with transferring cholesterol and lipids in the brain. But if we have a 2, so ApoE2, so everyone either has a 2-2, a 2-3, or a 3-4. I myself, I'm part of the absolute average. I'm a 3-3. And I'm a bit upset about that because it turns out that if you have just one of the ApoE2 alleles, it's actually protective against the disease. So a bit bummed about that, but not too bummed that I don't have the ApoE4. So if you are part of the small population that has the ApoE4 gene, that means you have an increased risk of getting Alzheimer's disease due to the fact that you will not be able to transport lipids around your brain as well as someone who doesn't. Now, does that mean it is the be all and end all? No. It just means that you will have to go very, very vigorous with your lifestyle when it comes to both exercise and nutrition and sleep, which is the fundamental pyramid, in my opinion.
And the ApoE4 is an easy one to test.
Oh, yeah. And we do it with all of our clients. It is a standard test. A lot of people are scared of getting this done. And there's two in the science world, in the neuroscience world, and neurologists think this as well. If you are the type of person who may be scared, a lot of people are scared to get their genes tested. There is something called genetic counseling, which I think everyone has the opportunity to get, meaning that if you do have ApoE4 and ApoE4, you can talk to a counselor about that to help you through the process.
And we're learning so much about it every day. And I love that we're going to take the rest of this podcast for all the prevention things, because I think that's where it's really going to shine. And people want the practical and tactical on, all right, Louisa, what can we do? What do we do to prevent? Let's dive right in.
Let's dive right in. First and foremost, at the bottom of that pyramid, I'm going to go with the biggest thing, the biggest lever that you can pull on, Carrie, is exercise, which is amazing because I love exercise. So I'm fortunate. We think that exercise is just something that makes us look good and feel good, but it actually is the best, and I say this with caution, the best preventative tool against Alzheimer's disease. And I'll tell you why. One of the biggest things that we need for our brain to keep active is blood flow. The brain is the most vascular rich organ in the entire body. You can actually pull apart the vasculature of the brain, your blood vessels, your veins, your capillaries. If you span it out, it can actually cross around 400 miles.
I did not know that.
I know. So that is really important. So why do we need blood flow? Well, our brain cells, by the way, I do want to point out, by the age of 30, your brain begins to atrophy. Atrophy is decrease in cell size. We just begin to lose neurons, Carrie, and that's just part of the natural brain aging process. If you were to get my brain and MRI it against a brain of an 80-year-old, you would see that theirs would be smaller and it would have shrunk. That's just due, even if they have the perfect diet, that's what happens. But we can slow the progression of that atrophying. So every cell needs blood flow. And if it doesn't get blood flow, even for a day, that cell dies. So we need to be adequately sending blood to the brain. What's the best way to do that? Well, we already get blood flow to the brain because we're just alive at about maybe 60 beats a minute. But the more shunting of the brain through exercise, the better. So one of the best forms of feeding your brain blood flow is via long distance aerobic activity. And actually, well, that's why the CDC recommends 150 minutes at minimum of moderate to vigorous physical activity per week. That's for all-cause mortality and, of course, for dementia. So when we're doing this, when we're working out, and I call this zone 2, which is around 65% of your maximum heart rate, you're able to upkeep it, which is great because you're getting the ongoing supply of blood to the brain. But not just that, when you're working out at that pace, you're getting a host of other benefits. For example, we release something called BDNF, which is brain-derived neurotropic factor. And this is a growth factor for the brain. So I'm sure you know this. I don't know if you do, but one of the first things to go for dementia is your memory, or your Alzheimer's disease is memory, specifically short-term memory, not long-term. Because you can see Alzheimer's disease patients in their late years and they remember long-term. Sometimes they forget who their son is, but they do over time remember that, but they won't remember if they met somebody 2 weeks ago. So first thing to go is short-term memory, and your memory lives within this seahorse-shaped structure called the hippocampus, which is deep within the temporal lobes, just here. And that has been shown both in humans and in mouse models to grow in size just due to aerobic physical activity. So we can grow the hippocampus, and we can also create new neurons in the hippocampus and the subregions of the hippocampus. So that's pretty monumental, right?
It's massive, and it doesn't require a huge amount of effort, quite honestly. Everybody can go do aerobic exercise.
They should.
But I think a barrier for a lot of people is, one, I don't know how to exercise, but everybody knows how to walk at a bare minimum, hopefully, depending on the person. And two, where they'll say, well, I can't afford it. I can't afford a gym. I can't afford to hire somebody for this. I'm like, oh, no, no, no. It doesn't require super fancy, super expensive. That's what she's saying.
And the great thing is, your brain actually doesn't know the difference between you outside running and you just jumping up and down on the spot. So what you want to do in that aspect is just recognize the fact that you just need blood flow. That's what I talk about. Just blood flow. So what's that going to do? Maybe you can skip for an hour. I mean, you want to do something that you can maintain. I do my zone 2. I mean, I walk a lot. I'm in New York City, but I do specifically my zone 2 because for me to get into zone 2, I have to bump it up a notch. I do it on a bike, a stationary bike. I do go to the gym. You can do it outdoors, whatever you want. You just stop overthinking it, because you're overthinking, your lack of decision is actually going to be detrimental to you because it's an ongoing effect. You can't just do this as a one-off, right? You want to keep doing it and having this compounding effect. And that BDNF is expressed in the brain, not just to grow the hippocampus, but do you know that it can actually serve as a protective mechanism against depression and depressive-like symptoms? So you're not just getting the dementia aspect, you're also feeling good. That's why so many people are like, oh, I'm full of endorphins. Why do I feel so good after my run? It's these neurochemicals that are getting released during long bouts of exercise, which can help with satiety. We know it can increase the activity of GLP-1. We know that it can help with so many different things. It's not just dementia.
I heard you say on Women of Impact, Lisa Bilyeu's podcast, you're talking about a healthy brain will also have healthy thoughts. And that even can translate into the thoughts about your job, or if you choose to see the red flag of the person that you're dating. If your brain is not that healthy, you can sort of slide into that, meh, I don't care, whatever. But if you're a healthy person, healthy brain, healthy thoughts, you're going to immediately catch that red flag and go, no, hard boundary, I'm out. And I thought that was so wonderful how you phrased it. Because now that you said that, so many people, I look at them and I think, oh, not a healthy brain, not a healthy brain. You could use a healthy brain.
Yeah, because you know why? It takes energy to do that. It takes energy to do everything, right? And that's how your brain is really built. We're built for two things: survival and reproduction. Evolutionarily, we were dying after reproduction, and we saw people dying at age 45 or 40. And now that we're living longer because of antibiotics and penicillin, it's like, oh, well, my brain is still a primitive organ. So if it just wants survival, it chooses that over anything. So if it's in a sleep deprived state, you've already set yourself up for failure the moment that you've woken up, because now it's built for survival. So if there is a cupcake in front of you, it will choose to eat it because it's like, well, it's so much easier for my brain, survival mode, to pick the cupcake up and eat it because I don't have time. This is how your brain's saying, I don't have time to just say no. And it's like that in marriages that are not good, or relationships. And you're just like, yes, 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 that's fine. And it's like, yeah, you can't recognize those red flags.
You can't recognize the red flags. And I think that's so important and going to be a big aha for a lot of people when it comes to brain health. All right, moving up the pyramid. We've got exercise, critical, non-negotiable, have to do it.
Non-negotiable is also resistance training. I have to point on it. I won't spend long, but resistance training also offers another host of benefits. It is actually, I don't know if you know this, but we have a pharmacy in our muscles, and that pharmacy can be opened. The gates to that pharmacy can be opened with contraction of the muscles. So guys, be going to the gym and actually pumping weights, because weights is actually what's going to get you to excrete these myokines. They are muscle-based proteins. They're proteins that live in the cells of the muscles, and they go through into all your organs in your body. They cross the blood-brain barrier, and they have positive effects on your mood, on the growth of the gray matter, on everything. So it's not just running or aerobic, it's also resistance training.
And can body weight exercises count, or do you need to up that weight on what you're carrying or holding?
You need to up the weight, and it honestly depends on how unfit you are. I could get the same benefits as maybe a sedentary 70-year-old who was just going to do a leg wall sit, right? But you do need to be pushing really heavy to get those effects.
And don't worry, women, you're not going to become this massive, bulky, out of control person, which is often a concern for a lot of women. I don't want to become bulky.
Yeah, I got to tell you, to become bulky, you have to be lifting like 6 times a week and eating a ton of protein.
And probably doing other things on top of it to get that bulkiness.
Definitely. Yes, absolutely.
Okay, next up the pyramid level.
Next up is sleep. Sleep by far is the most underrated high performance tool that we have, and we're neglecting it. I'm realizing it. And I think to myself, why do I have a better brain than my friends? Right? I think I do.
If you do say so yourself.
Well, actually, funny story. I have an EEG scanner, and I scanned all my friends, right? I scored higher than them. So I actually can tell them, I'm like, listen, I've got a better performing brain than you. So I make the decisions. So sleep, honestly, I think it's because I sleep really well. I'm stringent on my sleep. We'll categorize sleep as just two things, two stages, right? We'll just categorize it as stage 3 and stage 4 sleep because that's what we're talking about, right? Stage 3 sleep is also known as slow wave sleep, but that is when it's a deep sleep. And that is when we're getting probably the most benefits for our brain. Two things happen during this state. One is we get the activation of our glymphatic system. That's like a sewage system for the brain. And remember, Carrie, at the start, I mentioned this protein, amyloid beta. So amyloid beta actually gets cleared out during deep, slow wave sleep because the neurons actually shrink. Specific neurons, the immunity ones, they're called glial cells, they shrink in size, and our cerebral spinal fluid has time to wash through the brain and clearing out the toxins and the debris. So all those toxic things that we hear about now, don't ask me if microplastics are built up in there, more than likely, but I don't know. Hasn't been shown yet, but all of those toxins, they get cleared out during deep, slow wave sleep. So that's fundamental for a healthy performing brain. And it doesn't matter if you don't have Alzheimer's disease. That's what we need to be doing.
Is there a minimum or maximum amount of deep sleep you like to see in your clients?
Okay, well, there's no maximum. I mean, I would love someone to present me with a maximum, but the way I tend to look at it is I want everyone to sleep from 10 p.m. till 6 a.m. That's what lights out are at Neuro Athletics. So we're getting everyone to take their sleep stack, like their sleep vitamins, if they are, at around 9:30. We want them asleep by 10. And what we'll then do is we'll look at total sleep time. So over an 8-hour period, we want 20% of total sleep time to be made up of REM sleep and 40% to be made up of deep sleep, 40% or more.
Wow, this is significant. Okay. 40% or more. Do you find the wearables on the market are accurate?
So I currently wear an Aura ring. I'm not supported by them in any way. And by the way, it hasn't worked for 4 weeks. I still wear it every day.
Mine isn't either.
And I don't know who to get in contact with. It's driving me absolutely insane, which shows my addiction, right? So I haven't measured my sleep in 4 weeks, which is huge for me. So the accuracy, by the way, I don't think there really is any difference between Whoop or Aura. The other ones I would never recommend. The Apple Watch, absolutely not. The Fitbit, I don't know if it does it, but absolutely not. And also the Garmin, absolutely not. Stick to either Aura or Whoop. Second thing is accuracy. You're never going to get anything outside of a sleep lab. So don't even think that it's at that accuracy, right? But a wearable, actually, I think it's around, I would say around 68%, 70% accurate. But that's not what you need to look at. That's not the way you need to view wearables. You view wearables in terms of trends and ratios. The same that we will see in you. I know you look at blood work, the same that you would see blood work, right? Trends and ratios. And so what I'm looking for is trends over time of my clients. So I'm looking at what did you do the day before? If you had a wine the day before, I wanted to see that your REM sleep has plummeted. So I just want to see trends. That's what it's really good for, not the complete accuracy.
What about other keynotes I've heard you say before, such as blackout curtains, sleep masks, temperature in the room? How does that all affect this?
Let's just say you've presented with, I've got bad sleep, I've got low REM, low D, we've assessed everything. First thing I'm going to do, first and foremost, is I'm going to ask you, do you consume alcohol? Because alcohol is probably the biggest thing that is going to plummet your sleep. You want to stay clear of that if you're working on your sleep fitness. The next thing is, and I hate that I always have to ask people this because it's still ludicrous to me, THC. It turns out there's a population of people out there that think that THC is helping them sleep. It's not doing that. These sedatives, if you will, are sedating you. Maybe they're lowering your inhibitions. Maybe they're activating your parasympathetic nervous system, making you feel calm. There is a difference between calm and sleep. So get rid of it. Second thing we might want to do is we want to ask you two questions. Are you having trouble falling asleep or are you having trouble staying asleep? If you're having trouble falling asleep, maybe you've got a racing mind. We'll want to address that through behavioral practices. Maybe you want to write down everything in a journal. Maybe you want to release whatever's in your head, or maybe you want to supplement with something called GABA, gamma aminobutyric acid. That's really great. It's our chief inhibitory neurotransmitter. It'll calm down your mind. Other things that I like to use are, you said blackout curtains. Now I'm in New York City, right in Manhattan. Everything's lit up, right? So I actually wear a sleep mask. I've worn one for several years, so I don't have a problem with it. So that keeps everything black anyway, but I also have blackout curtains.
What about temperature?
Temperature, yes. I sleep on a temperature controlled mattress. You don't have to do this. A really easy hack is to actually sleep with your feet outside of the sheets. Yeah.
I need everybody to know this because I think this is important. My husband and I were listening to one of her podcasts in preparation for this, and my husband is not in the health space at all. And he was talking about you, of course, and he's like, "Oh, she explains things so well." And he gets into bed last night and he goes, "We need better blue light blocking curtains." Now we have them, they just don't seem to stretch all the way across, and I'm aware I need to buy more, right? But I just haven't got to it yet. He goes, "We need more blue light blocking curtains." And he goes, "And I'm gonna take my socks off. I'm gonna sleep with my feet out of the cupboard." I mean, I'm like, "I am your wife. I do these things. I have been telling you these things, but if this is what it takes, I do not care. I don't care." And my mother-in-law lives 3 hours north of us, and we have not quite finished one of your podcasts. We've listened to several, and he said, "On our drive up, can we finish that? I'm learning a lot." And I was like, "Yes. We can." So he asked this deep sleep question and asked about blue light blocking and then mouth taping. Does mouth taping work?
Mouth taping is great because it'll enable you to sleep and breathe through your nose more effectively. I would caution against it. It would be great to have a partner next to you just in case something might happen. I'm sure if you feel like you're choking, it would be natural to rip it off. That's the only thing around it. But it actually is really great for your nasal. Like you want oxygen to be going through your nose because you actually get more of it going through your nose when you breathe through your nose. Yes, it does change the facial structure as well over time. A lot of us actually do apnea through the night, regardless of whether you have sleep apnea. Some of us may, throughout the night, breathe through our mouth, and we can actually pick up on that. One thing, Carrie, that I've not talked about on a podcast before, one thing that we're experimenting with at Neuro Athletics is really getting into carbon dioxide in the room. And we now distribute carbon dioxide little meters, which anyone can go and get. Maybe around $200 on Amazon, but it measures the amount of carbon dioxide in the bedroom. And it turns out that because I live in New York and because I live in an apartment with many other apartments, we're all breathing in each other's air. So, what you also want to do, so another hack is the less amount of people in the room, the better. Okay, I understand it. This is why a sleep divorce apparently exists. Okay, I'm not telling you to go and get rid of your husband out of your bed, but do you have any pets?
A dog.
Okay, does he sleep in your room?
Of course he does.
So of course, he's raising the carbon dioxide levels in your room. Okay. So guess what that's going to do? That's going to increase your respiration. So your respiratory rate is another thing that we're looking at on the Oura Ring. And now my respiratory rate is around 16. I'm embarrassed to say that because it should be 12. That means I'm taking 16 breaths per minute. But why? Why would I be taking so many when I'm in a sedentary state? So I want to look at bringing that down. Either it's carbon dioxide or it's sympathetic nervous system activity. It's not sympathetic drive though, Carrie, because I look at my heart rate variability and my resting heart rate. So it's got to be carbon dioxide. So I got the meter and the carbon dioxide was through the roof. And so I'm buying a bloody one of those air purifiers now.
I was gonna say, would an air purifier work or opening if you're not in New York City? Would opening a window at night help?
Yes, but then the burden of loud noises, you just can't win, right? So I don't know. But then again, in Australia, my respiratory rate was down because I have a house there, not an apartment. So it's different.
I may have to check that. That is so good to know.
But leave the door open as well for more circulation of air.
Yes, we do that. We do that. Oh, the poor dog.
Yeah, the dog has to go maybe to his bed outside.
He will be devastated. Oh, okay. All right. And then last question, lighting and blue light blocking glasses as it relates to sleep.
Lighting, fundamental at around 8 p.m. You really want to minimize how many lights you have on. Lighting on the floor can be great. And then blue light blocking glasses, I'm sorry, they're not effective, but I wear them. Okay. So they're probably like 1%, doing a tiny fraction of help. I still do it anyway. And that would help. The funny thing is, I didn't have them in Australia and I was staying with my parents when I went there for a couple of weeks. So I put my sunglasses on and my mum knocked on my door and she wanted to see me. I was on my computer. She goes, "What are you doing?" I had my sunglasses on the computer. I was like, don't even worry about it, mom. So anything can help you, but if you can do anything, it would do that. I've also got red lights actually set up in my apartment. So the red lights come on at 8 p.m.
And I know there are light bulbs. There are red light bulbs.
Yeah. Really cheap on Amazon. Yeah. Super cheap to get. Again, it helps you that 1%. But I really want to be clear with everyone. Don't do the 1%ers, like the light bulb change, if you're not even sleeping well. And yes, to answer your question offline, you do need to be sleeping prior to midnight for so many different reasons. So if you're not sleeping 10 p.m. till 6 a.m., if you're not getting at minimum 7.5 hours of sleep, if you are drinking alcohol, if you are stressed, if you are waking up, then the light bulbs are not going to help you. Like, work on the big things first and then work on the accessories.
And what do you do for the people who wake up in the middle of the night? They fall asleep, no problem, head hits the pillow, but then 3 a.m., they get up.
So many different reasons for that as well. It could be melatonin, could have, and I know you know a lot about that. Melatonin could be disrupted. We can also do a melatonin test to figure that out. So let's just say it's not that. Then we have to actually find out, why are you waking up? Is it urination? And some people do drink a lot of water and that's all. They just need to get up to urinate. So there's problems around that you might want to look into. But if you do get up, worst thing you can do is turn the lights on. But then it's like, well, Louisa, that means I'm going to pee on the floor, right? It's like, okay, well, we don't want that either. So what I've actually done for a lot of our older clients, like we service many from 40 years and above, or even from 30 years and above, I actually got these strips. They're sticky. They're tiny little LED lights, if you will. And I get them to strip the bathroom with it. And they're actually blue. So that you can get blue ones, you can get red ones. I see a lot of YouTubers using it in the background. It's like a strip with tiny lights, and that's what you can use to go to the bathroom.
I have a plug-in, like a night light, but it's a salt lamp light. So it's amber. When I turn it on, it's like a red amber light. And that's what I have in our bathroom. One, because I think it's really pretty. And two, because it emits more of a red light if I need it in the middle of the night.
Well, are you a constant? Do you wake up in the middle of the night?
It depends. I don't think anything abnormal. I just liked it because I thought they were really cute and cool and be great when I had doing my bath. And then it turned out they were really helpful if I did get up at 3 in the morning to pee.
Yeah. And again, nothing is pathological here. We just need to understand that. Sometimes I get up in the middle of the night because I've got a racing mind.
Or hot, right? A lot of women listen to this podcast are in their 40s, 50s, 60s. They're still getting hot flashes and night sweats. They wake up at 3, throw the covers off, hot, bring the covers back, and then try to go back to bed.
Actually, my aunt, I think she's 68 and she's getting hot flushes. She's like, you have no idea how I'm feeling right now. She goes, I get up in the middle of the night, I can't sleep. And she sleeps next to her husband. And her husband said she's like a sauna, so it wakes him up.
That's hard and not uncommon. Okay, next up the pyramid. We have exercise, we have sleep. What's next?
Nutrition. And that's the end of the pyramid. Notice how I didn't say anything else like ice baths. I didn't say saunas. I didn't say anything else. I've got an ice bath sitting behind me.
I saw your post that you measured wrong.
Yeah, of course. But I will focus just a little bit on nutrition. Now, I stick to my lane, which is I publish on resistance training and Alzheimer's disease. So I try and stick to that. But I'll talk a little bit about nutrition because it is important. It's just being really simple and very smart. Evidently, we don't want to be piling sugar. Evidently, we don't want to be having these saturated fats. What's good for your heart is good for your brain. So if you really want to think about how can I service my brain in the best way, it'll be the same as how can you service the arteries in the best way. Keep lipids down, right? Your ApoB, your LDL-C, like you really want to keep those down. Maybe checking for your Lp(a). We want to keep lipids down because we really want that blood flow in the arteries. What's next on the list? We know that antioxidants are wonderful for the brain, right? And I just want to also point another thing out for women. And I don't know if you've heard of this, Carrie, but it's a phenomenon in neuroscience called neurosexism. You heard of it?
I don't think so.
It's going to make you upset at Charles Darwin, but I'll tell you anyway. You can be mad at him with me. So what happened actually in 1850 was they weighed brains. They got the brain of a female. They got the brain of a male. 1850, Carrie, 1850. They measured the brains. They saw that the male brain was actually heavier than the female brain. So they concluded in 1850 that men's brains were bigger, ergo they have more gray matter, ergo they are better at decision making, ergo they should go to work, women should stay home because men make better decisions. And since then, science has not evolved. And so all of the science that we have done today has just been really, not all of the science, but a lot of the science has just been done on men. Therefore, a lot of the prescription medications or even prescription lifestyle interventions are fitted for men. But we need to think differently because we are women and we have a neuroendocrine system. So if you are, and I'll be really careful with the language I'm using now in terms of gender, but if you were born and assigned a female at birth, you were born with ovaries, okay? And that means you possess more estrogen receptors in your brain. Really important right now. You possess more than if you were born a male with a penis and testicles. So that's what I'm talking about when I talk about gender. So you have more estrogen receptors. So we are different. And every single month, something different happens to us than it does to men. So we should be treating our brains so much differently than men. And I just will add on to that. Why was the male's brain then, Louisa, bigger? Well, it turns out that brain size correlates with head size. So you could just go and get a man with a small head and weigh his brain and get a woman with maybe a little bit of a larger skull and weigh her brain, and a female brain would be bigger. But I'm pretty sure that they wouldn't do that back then. So blame Charles Darwin for that. So this is why, ladies, it's so important. And it doesn't matter if you are married and your husband is not experiencing what you are. You have something really important to look after the age. What is postmenopausal? 50?
The average is after 51.
After 51. Yeah. And so where are the estrogen receptors at that time? Like they're still there, but they're not getting, is that what it is?
Yeah.
Estrogen.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They're like
Estrogen's
waving in the
completely down.
wind,
They're
hoping for
just
some
waiting
estrogen.
there like this. Exactly. So we need to do something because that is why 2 out of 3 cases are women. Not just that, there's also something called the grandmother theory, which we won't go into, but women tend to A, live longer, B, they are less prone to talking about their symptoms with their doctor. Whereas a man will be like, I've hurt my knee, I'm going to the doctor. Man flu, right? Whereas women will just fight through it and not do anything about it. If you feel anything, go and seek medical advice. Let's get back to nutrition. Antioxidants, wonderful for the brain. And one of the best things that we can be having are berries. Berries are great for the brain. Yep, love them. Our brain is actually made up of fat and water. And it turns out that 20% of the total lipids in the brain are made of DHA. DHA comes from omega-3 fatty acids. So consuming omega-3 fatty acids in the form, I will say, of supplementation will be key because we can't get the amount, which is 4 grams a day, in my opinion. We can't get that from fatty fish.
And our fish industry at the moment doesn't seem to be the healthiest, depending where you get your fish from.
I mean, I think they're like cutting it open and then there's like bottles and like plastic inside the fish too.
Yeah, it's horrifying.
Yeah. I'll also add and I'll conclude with another supplement that you said earlier, Instagram famous. I don't think I am, but I did have a reel last week hit 3.5 million views in like a very short time frame because I spoke about creatine. And creatine, I have to tell you, has been given a bad rap. It's not just good for the body, it's also good for the brain. It helps with cell energy metabolism. And we know when you look at the pathology of even depression, Alzheimer's disease, Parkinson's disease, we see lower energy levels, neuronal energy levels. So that's why we're now seeing creatine being implicated with these disease states. So creatine is really great for your brain.
Is there a dose for men or women that you like to start people at, or the average person, or maybe an athlete?
5 grams a day. Yeah. And that's just a scoop. If you get any creatine, it's always going to give you a scoop. You can go up from there. You don't have to load it. You don't have to get off it. You can take it every day. If you are a larger man, if you will, maybe 7.5 grams a day. Some people are taking 10. You just want to monitor for yourself. If you feel like you're getting bloated, that's fine. It doesn't increase hair loss. It doesn't hurt your kidneys. It's not going to cause kidney stones. Like all of these things, it's a 1%. It's like if I eat something that I'm allergic to, like mayonnaise, I will end up in hives. It's not a generalized thing.
And I was just reading an article going over like the top 13 myths of creatine the other day. that touched on that hair loss, kidney stones, water retention, all of this stuff. And you don't have to work out to take creatine. I've had a number of women say to me, like, oh, I don't work out every day. I'm not going to take it. Like, no, 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 you can take it.
So do you have a brain? Yeah, because your brain needs it. Your brain needs it just to think.
So about 4 grams for fish oils and 5 grams for creatine. Last question are on the other sort of longevity anti-aging supplements that you see out there. Do we have enough information on methylene blue, urolithin A?
Urolithin A is wonderful. We can get that naturally through pomegranate, but obviously we'd have to eat large amounts of it. So supplementing with urolithin A is great. Actually, I wrote an article today on B vitamins. I think if I had to suggest any other form of supplement specific to the brain, it would be B vitamins, even in its methylated form, B6 and B12. It helps with myelin sheath, which coats the axon. It's implicated in neurodegenerative diseases, and homocysteine. It also helps with lowering homocysteine. So vitamin B, which by the way, everyone can get tested. It's really easy to get tested. Check your vitamin B status. That, and then other things that I would say is I really do advocate, if you're doing everything else in the pyramid, the accessory items, the icing on the cake. I do love the sauna. I do. I'm a huge advocate of the sauna. And when we get our body really hot, it can really help with clearing out of these toxic proteins. It can help increase BDNF. It can actually mimic the effects of cardiovascular exercise. I love getting cold. I have an ice bath. It's really wonderful for your brain. They're actually doing studies now, early studies on cooling down the neck for post-traumatic insults. So for TBIs and concussions, we know that we can increase our mitochondria, the number and the efficiency of our mitochondria with cold baths and with saunas as well. So they're my other two little longevity hacks.
But once you've done the pyramid, don't skip the pyramid. Got to stick to the pyramid.
Stick to the pyramid or nothing else will work. Yeah.
And does it matter in the sauna, dry sauna, wet sauna?
I tend to go into an infrared sauna, or you can do the one with you put the water on the coals. Yes.
For cold, does a cold shower count?
It can, but guess what happens? You end up getting used to it.
Yeah, that's what happened to me.
Yeah. It's about just shocking your body, really, because when you do that, that's when you get that vasoconstriction and then you get the vasodilation afterwards. So I haven't had an ice bath for a very long time. I mean, in my apartment. So I'm going to start to get back to that. I do them every day I will do this at around 45 degrees. Maybe at the end of summer, it'll be down at 41. And I do that for 3 minutes.
That was my next question. How long are you going to be in that cold bath for?
Yeah. You want to get to the shivering response, to the response where if I stay in longer, I'll pass out. So I'm going to get out now.
Okay. Oh my gosh. All right. Any last tidbits as we wrap this up?
Yes. I'd be remiss if I didn't mention the study that I mentioned on Lisa Bilyeu's podcast, which was an 80-year study of brain health. And what they concluded at the end of this at Harvard was one of the best things for a healthy aging brain is social connection. So the people that you are connected with, and this doesn't mean a relationship, it actually means friends. So the biggest life hack I have for you is, and by the way, it's a bi-directional thing. It can either be good or bad for your brain. Monitor the people that you speak to on a daily basis, the ones that you are connecting with. Are they good for you and are they good for your brain? And also monitor the people that you are following on Instagram. I really think now in 2024, you are who you follow, just as the same as you are who you spend the most time with. Monitor who those are and see whether they have longevity, because I ain't here to make friends in my 80s, right? Even now in my 30s, it's hard to like make a new friend and tell them everything I've been through, right? So I'm like, how can I keep this relationship up with my friends? And it takes time and effort. But when you really do that, and I've got like probably 5 best friends, and it's such a beautiful thing because that we go through everything together. And I realize like at hard times, it is good for your brain because you can vent to them, you can be happy with them, you can eat out with them, you can do everything with them.
And it's unfortunate a number of American adults, probably global adults, don't have a great community. They couldn't list 5 people who would show up at a drop of a hat. They couldn't list 5 people who would do those things that nurture their heart and their brain. And I'm glad you ended with that. I think that's really important for people to put the time in to their community, to the people they love, whoever that is. I love it. All right. How do people find you? How can they learn more about you?
Well, I hang out on Instagram quite a bit. Louisa Nicola, she's always on there. I also have a podcast, The Neuro Experience, and we actually have a really great newsletter that goes out twice a week. It's called Neuro Athletics.
We will put all of that in the show notes. So, because again, like I said, she's Instagram famous. Her podcast is fantastic. My husband is now obsessed with her podcast because they're easy to understand. Thank you for being on this podcast, the Root Cause Medicine podcast.
Thanks, Carrie.
Welcome to Rupa Health, the best place to order, manage, and track results from over 30 different lab companies in one single place for free. It's going to take you under 2 minutes to sign up, and you can order any functional medicine lab for your client in under 30 seconds. Let me show you how it's done. So here's our beautiful interface. I'm typing in the name of my client, selecting the lab that I want to order for them, and hitting send. From there, Rupa and their amazing team handle the rest. They email the client, collect payment, and even offer an interest-free 3-month payment plan. We've also built the world's largest library of information about chronic health conditions, the lab tests that can help you find the root cause, and the evidence-based interventions that you can use to help people heal from them. It's called the Rupa Health Magazine. There, we have in-depth articles about almost any health condition you can imagine. And we give you step-by-step protocols that other clinicians have used to help their clients heal and that are verified by evidence-based sources. You should totally check it out, and it'll transform your practice. And we can't wait to see you. So make sure you sign up today at rupahealth.com.